Oh boy.
When I wake up each day, I feel so weary. Try to face the world, but it's so dreary. But I found that special thing that makes me cheery. Time to do music theory. Music theory.
You're watching Adventures in Music Theory with your host, Dr. Robbins. See? I told you there'd be theme music. Welcome to our online music theory classroom. Here we'll pick up where we left off. In Unit 11 of Music Theory is a merciless monster that will eat you alive. Now, as you may remember, Unit 11 deals with triads and inversion. We've already covered first inversion triads, so now let's move on to second inversion triads. Second inversion triads are also known as 6/4 chords. As you may recall, that 6/4 is the figure bass symbol for second inversion triads. And on this staff, we see two different triads written in second inversion. Both of them have the appropriate pop chord symbol and the appropriate Roman numeral with the 6/4 figure bass symbol afterward. The 6/4 symbol reminds us that whenever a triad is written in second inversion with its fifth as its lowest pitch, the intervals of a sixth and a fourth appear above the bass note. And historically, musicians have treated 6/4 chords carefully, maybe because of the interval of a fourth above the bass note, which they treat as an unstable dissonance. If you don't believe a fourth above the bass creates instability, listen to this experiment. Here are two different chord progressions. One goes 1, 4, 5, 1, and all four chords are in root position, and the other one goes 1, 4, 5, 1, but that final chord is a one chord in second inversion. Let's listen to both of them and note the effect. Here's 1, 4, 5, 1 in root position. You might notice how that final one chord in root position sounds rather stable. Here's that same progression now going 1, 4, 5 and then ending on 1, 6, 4. Take note of the bass note in the final chord. The only chords which appear as second inversion triads are the 1, the 4, and the 5 chords, the so-called primary triads. You're not going to encounter a 2-6-4 chord or a 6-6-4 chord, and you're also not going to see any 6/4 chords that happen using augmented or diminished triads. Second inversion triads are for primary triads only. Whenever we have second inversion triads in part writing, the correct doubling is to double the fifth of the chord, which is located in the bass. This is one of those places where the when in doubt, double the bass rule will come in handy. And it's also one of the only times where there is a specific doubling that must happen. For second inversion triads, we have to double the fifth, double the bass. And finally, second inversion triads have specific roles they fulfill in music. There are 4 functions we find second inversion chords happening. These are the so-called cadential 6/4 chord, the passing 6/4 chord, the neighbor or the pedal 6/4 chord, and the arpeggiated 6/4 chord. The cadential 6/4 chord is the most commonly encountered 6/4 chord in classical music styles. As its name implies, this chord is found near cadences. A cadential 6/4 chord is a 1/6/4 chord that moves to a root position 5 chord in a cadence. The cadential 6/4 chord appears in a metrically stronger position than the 5 chord that follows it. This usually means it's on a strong beat, such as beat 1 in any time signature, as well as beat 3 in quadruple meters. If the cadential 6/4 chord's on a weak beat, then the 5 chord that follows it must be in a weaker metric position. For instance, if the cadential 6/4 chord is on weak beat 2 in 2/4 time, then the 5 chord needs to be on the even weaker and of beat 2. Finally, the tendency of voices above the bass note is to resolve down by step from the 1/6/4 chord to notes in the 5 chord. And you can see two of the voices that are marked with arrows doing that in example 11-4. Notice also that when we analyze cadential 6/4 chords, we place a letter C in a bracket underneath to show us that it's functioning as a cadential 6/4 chord. So in summary, cadential 6/4 chords are second inversion 1/6/4 chords that come before a 5 chord in a cadence. An authentic cadence, a half cadence, or a deceptive cadence. Two upper voices tend to move down by step to notes in the 5 chord. The chord happens on a metrically strong place in the measure. The bass note stays on the same pitch for the 1/6/4 chord and the 5 chord. And doubling wise, as is the case with all of our 6/4 chords, you want to double the fifth of the chord, which is in the bass. And let's give example 11-4 one more listen to notice all of those things at once. The passing 6/4 chord also appears frequently in classical music styles. In this progression, the bass note of the passing 6/4 chord is approached and left by step in the same direction, like a passing tone is. A passing 6/4 chord often connects a chord in root position to that same chord in first inversion or vice versa. So the stepwise bass line can either go up by step or down by step. And we can see and hear this in example 11-7. A notable feature of many passing 6/4 progressions is a thing called a voice exchange. It happens when an upper voice mimics the bass voice in reverse. So if the bass is going up by steps A, B, C, then there's some upper voice at the same time going down by steps C, B, A. The voice exchange is shown by the dashed red arrows in example 11-7. So here's an easy way to get a passing 6/4 chord progression correct whenever you're doing part writing. Remember that little song that's written at the top of the slide here. It sounds like this. Bass goes up or goes down, common tone, neighbor tone. And what that song is telling us is this. If you take those 4 measures of 2/4 time and stack them up vertically, then as long as you put the first measure or the second measure in the bass voice and put the other voices above it, it'll form a really fine passing 6/4 progression. And that's what those two examples at the bottom of the page are demonstrating. If you look at them, you realize that all those lines in the song on the top have been put into the chord progressions on the bottom. Here's what it sounds like. So, to summarize about passing 6/4 chords, they tend to connect root position chords to those same chords in first inversion. Most importantly, the bass note of a passing 6/4 chord is approached and left by step in the same direction, like a passing tone. There's going to be one of the upper voices that forms the so-called voice exchange above that bass line, where while the bass is going up F, G, A, some upper voice is coming down A, G, F. They're usually metrically weak. When we analyze them, we put the letter P in brackets underneath the 6/4 chord to show its functioning as a passing 6/4 chord. And as is the case with all of our 6/4 chords, we double the fifth of the chord, which is in the bass. Let's listen to 11-7 one final time. And that brings us to the pedal 6/4 chord, which is also called the neighbor 6/4 chord. Either term is acceptable. The pedal or neighbor 6/4 chord is used to ornament or embellish a root position chord by appearing between that chord in root position. You usually see these progressions that go 1, 4, 6, 4 to 1, or 5, 1, 6, 4 to 5. Where like in that last one, the 5 on either side would be in root position with a second inversion, 1, 6, 4 in the middle. Sounds like this. Whether a person decides to call it a pedal 6/4 chord or a neighbor 6/4 chord depends on what aspect of the chord they want to focus on. If they're calling it a pedal 6/4 chord, they're probably focusing on the unchanging bass voice, which is the same pitch before and after the pedal 6/4 chord, just like a pedal tone. And when we analyze them that way, we put a little bracket beneath with PD inside of it to show it's functioning as a pedal 6/4 chord. If a person designates it as a neighbor 6/4 chord, then they're probably focusing on the fact that two of the upper voices above the bass note tend to move up by step and then back down by step to their original pitches, like upper neighbor tones. And when we analyze it as a neighbor 6/4 chord, we might choose to put a little bracket underneath that says N to show it's functioning as a neighbor 6/4 chord. Whether you call it pedal or neighbor doesn't matter as long as you get the right one. So to summarize, pedal or neighbor 6/4 chords embellish root position chords. There are two upper voices that move up by step and then back down by step to their original notes, like upper neighbor tones. The bass voice stays the same throughout, like a pedal tone. It can be repeated or held out. And doubling is double the fifth of the chord, which is in the bass. Let's listen to example 11-8 one more time. And finally, we come to the arpeggiated 6/4 chord. Now, a lot of classically oriented theory textbooks don't address the arpeggiated 6/4 chord, and you're probably not going to see very many of them, if any really, in the works of classical composers like Mozart, Brahms, etc. However, when you consider how often this chord shows up in other styles of music, like bluegrass, polkas, country music, things like that, you start to realize this might be the most commonly occurring 6/4 chord of all. And the way a arpeggiated 6/4 chord works is the Roman numeral does not change throughout the progression. The chord just keeps moving through different inversions of the chord, one of which will be a second inversion. This example 11-9 shows how this happens, where while the chord stays a G major chord, the bass just keeps alternating back and forth between G and D, which means the chord goes from being a root position G chord to being a second inversion arpeggiated 6/4 chord. And you can see we mark arpeggiated 6/4 chords with an A. Here's example 11-9. So to summarize, arpeggiated 6/4 chords, there's no change of Roman numeral throughout them. It's always the same chord that just happens to wind up in second inversion at one point. The bass voice moves by leaps, arpeggiating the triad. And the doubling for the arpeggiated 6/4 chord, big surprise here, we double the fifth of the chord, which is in the bass, like we do with all of our 6/4 chords. And here's that final chord again. Okay, so that's our first online music theory meeting. I think it went well. As you all know already, there's a new syllabus that's been posted to Moodle and wherever else I post things like that, and I emailed you all the calendar last week, so you know what our schedule is. So the thing you need to do is make sure you make time for this class. I'm going to post videos on class days. The next video I post is going to be posted on Wednesday, April 1st. It will be called April 1 Voice Leading. Look at that video close to the day class is, and whenever I give homework assignments, you can send them to me as PDF scans, or you can take a picture with your phone. As far as how we're going to do things, we'll do things like we did today a lot of the time, where there will be a lecture video that you watch and get the information I want you to get from that video. There will be some of the things that we do that are going to be homework tutorials, where we go over the assignments from the workbook. And then we'll do something like on the David Letterman show, where we have viewer mail, and you all can send me your questions, and I will answer them. And above all, remember, we're going to finish what we started on the syllabus. We're going to get through everything so that when you all get back to campus next fall, we're ready to get going with chromatic harmony. But until then, sleep well, stay healthy, eat well, wash your hands, and I will see you on the interwebs. And there are a few things to consider about cadential 6/4 chords. Much less stable, isn't it? That last one chord sounds quite stable. And here's 1 4 5 1 6 4.